And welcome to the latest edition of GreenFleet Talks. My name's Kate Armitage and I'm your host for our discussion today. My guest this morning is no stranger to GreenFleet, and I'm delighted to welcome Rosario Sirachi, who's EV charging specialist, fleet and workplace at Drax Energy Solutions. Good morning, Rosario.
Hi, good morning, Kate.
How does it feel being in front of the camera?
Really weird.
You're going to be great. They're going to love you. We're talking today about e-trucks, and the market is really just beginning to gain traction. So, Rosario, just really kind of at a top level, the availability and the choice of vehicles within the battery electric car market is pretty good. We've got about 130 vehicles to choose from. Vans is a little bit behind, but we're starting to see that pick up, and approximately 40 different vans to choose from, but only a handful of electric trucks. So why are commercial vehicles more challenging to electrify than cars?
So I think with the lack of choice, the kind of cost is the obvious factor that's kind of causing the delays on fleets in making that transition. Commercial vehicles carry heavier loads, and they're on the road as much as is possible. That means that they will require larger batteries, likely more powerful DC charging infrastructure, and all of that contributes to higher upfront costs, which make it quite difficult for organizations' balance sheets to absorb.
Yeah, I mean, because these are big batteries, aren't they? These are big vehicles with big batteries.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of talking, with electric trucks sort of in and around the 600 kilowatt, are kind of the sort of normal sizes. I believe that there are some newer models that will be coming out with even larger batteries to obviously increase their range. So they're the bits that kind of add to the cost of the vehicle, or make up the large majority of the cost of the vehicle.
Yeah, and it's getting that magic TCO equation to work, isn't it? Which isn't quite there just yet. And it's not the only challenge either. So if I think about the public charging network, there are some common challenges for vans and trucks. And what can we do to make the public charging network more friendly for vans and trucks?
So I think the cost of the charging itself is quite high. I think there's, I'm involved in I see it a lot on LinkedIn chats and all of those sorts of things, that organizations are kind of raising the cost of how much it costs to charge using the public charging infrastructure. So I think that's kind of one of the issues. But working in the EV charging industry, I kind of understand that there's a lot of upfront cost that needs to go into make that charger available for organizations to use. So they need to recoup their cost. I'm sure they're not going to be putting, the charging infrastructure there for, and not make any profit out of it. And these are long-term investments that these organizations are kind of basing their decisions on. So over time, they're going to need to recoup the costs, and therefore the cost of the charging sessions are what they are at the moment. Hopefully, as more competition kind of happens, we'll see a reduction in that. But I've taken a large electric van to a charging hub that I wasn't aware had a solar canopy, and therefore able to get the van underneath and in and charge. So it's great that it's got the solar canopy, but maybe consideration for raising the height should be thought about at that planning stage. There isn't really across the UK enough charging hubs to really house large trucks with their trailer as well, so these things need to be considered as and when these organizations are planning their charging hubs, the size of the parking bay, the length of the parking bay, if they're going to put solar canopies in, the height of those solar canopies. Is it possible to kind of install bays where trucks with their trailers can actually park through with an island with a charger on it, and therefore that makes it a lot easier, because a lot of the time the length of the charging cable is in a fixed location, and might not be long enough. The trucks don't have a dedicated location where they have to have their charging port. So it can be at the front, it can be on the left side of the vehicle, it can be on the right side of the vehicle. The charger is very difficult to move once it's in situ. So all of these considerations need to be thought about as and when the actual charging hub is being designed, in order to kind of allow these newer vehicles or EVs to actually utilize those spaces.
So kind of two different issues, really. One is the planning and design of the charging infrastructure isn't taking it into account, and I think it's probably worth defining a kind of a line between e-vans and e-trucks, because e-trucks probably have will have specialist charging hubs eventually, but for the vans, really, there's no reason why, with a bit of thoughtful design, they shouldn't be able to use the same infrastructure as the cars. But you're right, and I've seen a van straddling two charging bays because it simply wasn't designed with them in mind. But your second point about the cost of the electricity, I think, is really really interesting, because they've got bigger batteries, because they're traveling longer miles. So much more money is spent on the electricity that if you are paying a premium, any chance of getting that total cost of ownership across the and savings on the fuel is increasingly unlikely, which probably means you should be looking at workplace infrastructure for these vehicles wherever you possibly can, because at least then you're able to have more control over the cost of the fuel.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, having your own infrastructure on your sites, you can design it correctly for the type of vehicles that you're running on your fleet. So that's kind of point one taken care of. But then obviously the actual running, the day-to-day costs of charging your vehicles is significantly reduced if you're able to do so. And I think we'll kind of come to it in part of the discussion, but having an understanding of also where your sites are located and where your vehicles travel to, and utilizing your own sites whilst that vehicle is on the road rather than having to use public charging infrastructure, can make a significant saving to your fleet operation as well.
Yeah. And obviously there's the question about availability. So it's not scheduled into a day that you may have to wait half an hour to access a public charge point. And reliability. So, what happens if you get to that public charge point and it's not working?
Yeah, I think from a EV car perspective, the charging infrastructure, I mean, I've seen it from our, the very first EV rally of Scotland that we did, and last year's EV rally. I mean, the difference is staggering. To the number of hubs that are there, the sockets that are there, the chargers are pretty good. RFID access and credit card access is all pretty good. It's because it is behind the times. It's going to take some time for the larger commercial vehicles and EHGVs, for the infrastructure and the specialist hubs for those types of vehicles to establish themselves. So it's going to take some time, and it's going to take some thought. It will get there, no doubt, but all of these sorts of things kind of put a little bit of caution in the mind of the fleet managers in terms of actually making that leap.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be there tomorrow. So, this is a gradual process. I mean, I don't think we're ever going to see the density of charging infrastructure for e-trucks that we have on the passenger car side, because of the size of the market. But trucks tend to be more predictable. So, as long as you've got infrastructure in 2, 3 or 4 trusted locations, that for most fleets, that would be sufficient. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. Okay, so we talked a lot about electrification, but what other strategies should be part of a holistic approach to decarbonising commercial transport?
So I think from my perspective, I'd say there's three key strategies. So I'd kind of say financial. So looking at the upfront costs, as we've already discussed, for electrification can be quite high. So it's trying to explore ways to find ways of recouping that investment. So one of the ways that us at Drax can support our clients is using flexibility markets. So you can sell some of the electricity that's stored in the vehicle's batteries when they're not in use. So if you've got an operation that's running Monday to Friday, and then over the weekend your vehicles are just parked up in your depot, literally doing nothing. Well, as we've already said, an EHGV can have a 600 kilowatt hour battery. That's a lot of energy that's kind of just sat there doing nothing. So you can use, sell some of that power back, and actually generate some revenue. But actually in doing so, you're kind of actually also supporting the grid as well, helping them manage demand, and then helping the UK travel towards, kind of a cleaner grid as part of that as well. The next one I'd kind of look at is operational. So as well as focusing on fleet data and completing, suitability assessments of your fleet. So you've got an understanding of the type of vehicle and charging infrastructure that you should run. Looking at things like sharing your charging infrastructure with other fleet operators. That's kind of a big kind of buzz within the industry at the moment. Organizations trying to find solutions of sharing infrastructure. So if an EHGV fleet operator, as I kind of identified earlier, using your own sites, but if there isn't that site and they can actually use a site of another organization that is en route, where they're going to be paying less than using the public charging infrastructure. So again, helps with total cost of ownership. And because it's en route, kind of doesn't really delay the driver from making their deliveries. So that's one of the things, but also kind of potentially using things like micro hubs as well. So kind of in larger cities, you can use smaller vehicles to make those deliveries, which then can mean that your infrastructure doesn't have to be DC. So it can be AC charging infrastructure, which typically is cheaper. Might mean you won't need to make any substantial power upgrades to the site as well. So it all helps in ways to kind of help the organization reduce their sort of upfront costs as well. And then I'd kind of say, technological as well. So, looking at internal sustainability terms and shaping their plans to optimize their decarbonisation approaches and benefits. So it's looking at, is there an option either now or in the future to use renewable self-generated electricity to power the vehicles? So this is going to help the organisation reduce their emissions, cost as well. If you're using your own solar, then that electricity is helping recoup the cost of putting that solar in, and after a few years that's paid for itself. So then you're into zero cost for running I'm sure not all of your fleet, but some of your fleet. But I did work at GreenFleet previously, and there are other types of technology out there. So it's not just EV is the right solution for every type of fleet operator. So if the vehicles that are out there at the moment can't go to EV, then look at things like biofuels, natural gas, hydrogen. There are organizations out there that are already using those types of technologies and substantially reducing their carbon emissions by doing so, and biding their time as to when the number of electric commercial vehicle options increases to the point at which they then can make that switch. So there's lots to consider when you're kind of making those plans, but it is really, I would say, at that beginning point, sitting down and really trying to look at what does your fleet look like, and having an understanding of the type of mileage they do, the dwell times and all of those sorts of things. And then working, there's many fleet telematics providers and, specialist organizations that can help review, the data of what their fleet looks like, and then make decisions based on what the actual proper data shows is currently happening.
And Rosario, the beauty with everything that you've just said is that these things are not independent. They are all suitable and they're all applicable, and they can all work together to solve different problems and different challenges. And the level of innovation is huge here.
Massive.
This idea of working with your energy company to monetize your battery in the vehicle when it's not in use, sharing your infrastructure as another revenue stream, investing in solar PV now so that in the future you're running your vehicles for free. I mean, this is really exciting stuff, and it's not pipe dream, it's real, and it is happening.
Yeah, and I think there's lots of organizations that are already doing it. So kind of talking to them and finding out what did you do, how did you do it, why did you do it, and actually just having those. So many fleet operators that I speak to are really happy to share what they're doing. Those discussions around flexibility markets is something quite new, but that is where the sort of e-truck operators that I'm talking to, that's where they're actually going to be able to maximize their return on the investment. That's how they see it, is kind of we're adding the e-truck to our fleet, but actually where we're going to be able to really kind of make the most out of it is playing with the energy markets, which we never had to. We don't really understand. But it does make the industry quite exciting, and the challenge is those organizations that see all of those challenges an opportunity to do things differently and better, they're the ones that are really going to succeed in my mind anyway.
Yeah, definitely. And and it really just to me highlights that it's not an accident that an energy company like Drax is working in this space and is offering these e-mobility solutions, because the two go absolutely hand in hand, and you've got to have that expertise on board if you're thinking about any of these innovations and additional revenue streams and that holistic view to e-mobility.
Yeah, absolutely. The holistic view is the key, really, is kind of looking at what do you really need to achieve, and then talking to the experts. And there's many out there that I have the pleasure of speaking to on a daily basis, that know more than I do, because they're actually doing it. They're actually a lot of the fleet customers, they're actually out there and actually doing it and taking the risk and taking the leap. So I take inspiration from learning from them. Why did you make that decision? How is that helping? And then hopefully those learnings I can pass on when I'm having discussions with other organizations as well.
I think you're underselling yourself, Rosario. So I would like to thank energy specialist and e-mobility and e-truck charging specialist Rosario Sirachi for joining me today and sharing his insights.
Thanks, Kate.
Great, thank you. And thank you, of course, to Drax Energy Solutions for joining GreenFleet Talks. That is about all we've got time for. Thank you for watching, and join us for GF Television again soon.